We're adjourning. I am calling to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for the City of Gahanna. Today is Monday, September 12th, 2022. We would like to move into Section B on the agenda. The first item on our agenda tonight, we're welcoming Executive Director Carly Boos from the Affordable Housing Association of Central Ohio, who is here with Director of Economic Development, Nathan Strum. I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Bowers. And good evening, everyone. As Vice President Bowers noted, I'm here with Carly Boos, Executive Director for Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio. Carly and I have actually had a couple conversations going back and forth here, months now at this point. Oftentimes, affordable housing and economic development are these weird stepchildren of development where you can't really have one without the other many times, because oftentimes we focus on workforce development programming and opportunities in that space, but you need the housing, and especially around the affordable housing, to make it kind of all make sense. And so Carly and I have been going back and forth about how do we make not only Gahanna more affordable, but what's going on in the region opportunity-wise, and she's provided some really great insights at other engagements and other forums. And so I wanted to bring her back out here tonight. She's been before this council before. I thought it would be helpful to bring her back again. So thank you for joining us this evening at our economic development affordable housing to make it kind of all make sense. And so Carly and I have been going back. That's what I sound on YouTube? Wow. Let's don't do that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director Boos for her presentation this evening.
Thank you, Director, and thank you, Vice Chair. I do have a little presentation. Hopefully the clicker is going to work to go through.
I'm
I
coming.
know that I've spoken with you before, and
Hey,
I
her
did.
mic's on.
Thank you. I was just saying that I tend to be quite informal in how I present on some of these things, so feel free to stop and interrupt and ask questions. And certainly if there's something that I don't have the data on me tonight, I do love doing research, and I'm happy to take questions back and make sure that I get you a comprehensive answer. Stepchild, not exactly the way that I describe it, but flip sides of a coin, absolutely. Affordable housing, housing in general, and economic development, very closely correlated, interdependent with each other. If you have economic development without housing, you end up with a housing crisis. If you have housing without economic development, you end up with a Rust Belt sort of approach. So you always want to make sure that you're growing both of those opportunities simultaneously. I do start with some preliminary information. I think that it helps kind of anchor the conversation. One of the things is the definition of affordable housing, and I think the unsatisfying answer is there's no real concrete universal definition. The most widely used one is that housing is affordable if it costs no more than 30% of your income. Your 30% of income is going to look different from mine. It's going to look different from the people that I work with. It's going to look different from the people that my kid goes to school with. It's a very personalized sort of definition, and that flexibility is important to make sure that we have a whole range of programs that fit everybody wherever they are. One example that I pulled for this evening is a middle school teacher in Ohio. Middle school teacher is going to earn about $67,000 a year. What they can afford to pay under this rule is about $1,600 in rent or mortgage and utilities. So it's important to note that that does include the utility payment as well. If you do translate that into what a mortgage would be at kind of the prime interest rate at standard terms, but without any down payment, to kind of offset that lack of utilities in the formula, that's a home that would sell for about $188,000. I have those asterisks there to remind me to note that I looked on Zillow this morning. There are exactly 0 homes in Gahanna at or below that price range as of today. So it's not a perfect calculation, but in essence, we are closed to middle school teachers this evening. That's true across a lot of different job categories. So one of the metrics that we track, and I believe I've shared this with you before, but this again is current as of this morning. Today, our average home sale price is about $340,000, $345,000. That's for the region as a whole. Again, if you apply all of those same factors, the same terms, the same assumed interest rate, the same assumed taxes and insurance, what that's going to result in is a monthly payment of principal, insurance, interest, and tax of about $3,000. So double what that middle school teacher is able to afford for just our average home in Central Ohio. If you don't look at middle school teachers, but instead you look at minimum wage workers, you'll note that a minimum wage earner would have to work 6 full-time jobs to afford our average home. That's about 4 days that don't exist. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then you create 4 new days, and you work all day, every day for those. So it's becoming a growing gap that we're following. I wanted to pull some specific data on Gahanna, and not the people who live in Gahanna specifically, but the people who work in Gahanna. What kind of jobs are present in our community? There are about 27,000 jobs overall. I'm sure, Director, you look at this differently. This is on the map data from the Census Bureau, if you like a citation. About 18% of jobs pay at or below the minimum wage if they were 40 hours a week. My assumption is that those are going to be primarily part-time jobs where you're not able to accumulate that full minimum wage. And an additional 27% pay at about the housing wage, so just a little bit under $20 an hour. What that means is that almost half of people who work in Gahanna would need a housing payment that is $1,000 a month or less. And there just aren't that many places that are in that range for our entire community, not just Gahanna, not just Reynoldsburg, where I live today, but for Central Ohio as a whole. One of the things that I like to do, again, is have kind of a shared understanding and a shared definition of where different people fall on the spectrum. And this slide has a lot going on, but I do think that it's informative. So in the second column, you'll see what a household's income might be for an entire year. And we've got all the way at the top is extremely low-income households. Those are people who are earning minimum wage, people who are on fixed incomes or who are benefit dependent, primarily senior citizens and people with disabilities. All the way at the bottom, you kind of have the upper limit of what is considered affordable housing. And it's really a kind of a white-collar wage. It's a mid-career sort of worker. Anybody on that sheet is going to have an affordable housing program that is for them. So I include some of the sample jobs because, again, for me, I think through positions and people, and it helps. But I've also included just a sample of what some of the affordable housing programs we are or that we have to address these different income ranges. So at that extremely low income level, it's the conceptual affordable housing, right? It is public housing, it is housing choice vouchers, it is source of income. On a policy side, I tried to include both a program as well as a policy to see how we span some of these different gaps. But we have programs at all of these different levels, including up to that white collar level where you can buy a home using the Central Ohio Community Land Trust. or our most prolific affordable housing program in the country, the mortgage interest tax deduction, which even today, post tax reform, post Tax Cut and Jobs Act, is still the largest housing subsidy in the country, and it inures primarily to the benefit of extremely high income wage earners who itemize their taxes, which many of us no longer do. And again, I think that one of the things that you will see is the further down the income ladder you get to the lower incomes, those programs exist, but they are severely underfunded. So the framework, the apparatus is there, but the dollars aren't always there. Whereas if you go towards that higher income, those tend to be relatively ubiquitous, unlimited. The mortgage interest tax deduction, for instance, that never runs out. That is available in perpetuity. If you qualify, you receive it. Housing vouchers, on the other hand, do not. Affordable housing, the structures, do not. And my broader point, my meandering broader point, is that all of us need affordable housing. There's nobody who stands up and says, I'm going to really thrive with unaffordable housing. It just looks different and it feels different. And the solutions and tools that we use to get there are different depending on where you are starting from. I have gone through this slide with you in a different style the last time I joined. It's kind of the metrics. It's the hard data that we tend to peg progress towards. I've updated it for this year. I really just wanted you to have it in your packet so you could see how things have changed, and in some of these points, how things have not changed. I want to start with the working problem, which is the housing wage. In Franklin County, the housing wage is $19.85 an hour. That means to afford a modest two-bedroom apartment, you have to be earning at or above that wage. Of Ohio's 10 most common jobs, only one of them pays in that range, which is the registered nurse. The other 9 do not pay that rate. That is up just slightly from last year. It's up about 2 cents, so it's not a huge jump, but we are not getting better. We're basically holding steady. We've done some research here specific to Franklin County, and we surveyed employers who have a good grounded understanding of housing, but who are businesses and who have large staffs. And we said, what does the housing shortage look like for you, not as a policymaker or as a construction company, but as somebody who hires people and who has an HR department? 80% of them said that their workforce has increased anxiety, increased mental health challenges that directly result in lower productivity, lower outputs, and have a bottom line impact for them as businesses. Just under half also said that they are experiencing higher turnover as a result of the housing shortage. And anecdotally, what some of these experiences were is if my employee experiences an eviction, it's going to be very challenging for them to come into work the next day. It's going to be very challenging for them to get transit if their life is disrupted. It's going to be very challenging for them to make their kids' school time and work. So it has an impact as an employer. On the plus side, we know that affordable housing has a really beneficial impact on the community as a whole. For every 100 homes that are built, we can get about $8 million in local income generated and 122 jobs created. Many of those jobs are permanent. They exist after construction and live on forever. Similar dynamics happening at the education level. One of the sadder statistics that we see every day is that 76% of educators say that housing is a problem in their classroom. The students they serve are struggling with housing. That has a consequence, not just for the kids who are living in that, who don't have a place to do homework, who don't have a place to get a safe night of sleep and wake up ready for school. But as teacher resources are diverted towards helping kids who are falling behind, it means that the rest of the classroom is going to suffer as well. So this is something that impacts our schools nationally, not specific to Central Ohio, but globally. About 1 in 3 kids live in a household that is cost burdened. So it is a significant share of our youth who is impacted by this. And many, many of those children are doing so unassisted. There's no housing support, there's no voucher, there's no home. They are just white knuckling it. This is fresh data. I have mentioned this in passing at other presentations, but I want to underscore that this I just pulled this morning. It is 2020 data from the American Community Survey study. What it shows is how many units, how many homes we have for rent in our community and how that has changed over time compared to 2017. So in the last 3 years, have we gained or have we lost? You will see that in the blue, we have lost about 24,000 units, 24,000 homes that rented for under $900 a month. Simultaneously, we have gained well more than that who rent for higher rates. Doesn't mean that those houses were torn down or they fell down. It just means that they increased their rent. And to the extent that we are building new housing, it's primarily in that luxury space. We are inflating at the higher ends while we are losing at the lower ends. For context, households, there's about 14,000 households in all of Gahanna. There's about 14,000 households in all of Reynoldsburg. So we're losing an entire city of affordability in 3 years. And of course, that's having a direct impact on personal household finances. So on my left, you will see median home sale prices. It's a different way of displaying what I mentioned earlier. More than doubled in the last 10 years. That is not typical appreciation. That is astonishing. And rental, even worse. So I want to call out on the rental chart that you'll see the last 2 boxes are shaded in dark black. They're kind of hidden. I've done that on purpose. Up until the black boxes, it's ACS data. It's fantastic data. It's very solid. The Census Bureau does a great job. I love that data. I trust it. We don't have data for the last 2 years yet. There's a lag to it. So for the last 2, it comes from a different source. I just want you to know it's not an apples-to-apples statistic. But if the proprietary data that we are looking at for 2021 and 2022 is accurate, what we will have seen is about a 15% leap in rental costs in 21, followed by an 18% leap in 2022. That 30% over 2 years is literally unheard of. Talking about the tools that we have to solve this, to respond to it, it really, in my mind, kind of translates to 4 types of tools. Each of these have a lot of different products and programs and loans and things hidden inside of them, but it's 4 general categories. The first is what I consider to be value engineering. And that's where you take the apartment building that you would love to see. And I think all of us do this in our daily life, right? Like, here's the car I really want. It's got heated cushions. It's got the surround sound. Oh, my budget doesn't do that? All right. In housing land, that means you cut out marble countertops, you cut out swimming pools, you cut out all the bells and whistles. And that gets you a little bit more affordability naturally. To really maximize this tool, you do things that add more units to the same space. It's pejoratively called density, but really what you're trying to do is just maximize the resources that you have. So maybe if you have a single lot that had previously been a McMansion, it's now a duplex, and you can serve twice as many people, and you can spread those costs among 2 different households to lower that price. So zoning reform is one of the critical tools needed for people to really be able, and builders in particular, to be able to maximize the value engineering. Nationally, we know that 70% of all lots that are zoned for residential use, so things that could potentially be used for housing, the vast majority of them are prohibiting rental housing. Doesn't matter what it looks like, doesn't matter who lives in it, no rental housing, never, ever, ever. Beyond simply making rental housing or making affordable housing illegal, zoning tends to work against affordability objectives in 2 additional ways. The first is that it can add design requirements that are representative of the time that the zoning code was enacted as opposed to the day that we are living in. So if you look at zoning codes, there's kind of been big waves in history. You have zoning codes that look like the 1950s. And what they're really promoting is suburbanization, and they're promoting segregation because those are the policy objectives of the 50s. You have zoning codes that were written in the 70s that really were auto-centric. It was a very car-dependent era. And then you have some zoning codes from the early 90s, which are my favorite, the McMansion era, where you have absolutely giant lots with massive housing on them. All 3 of those models have value, and there are communities where it fits for them. And there's nothing wrong with having those, as long as that's what your community is looking for. Increasingly, however, consumer demands are moving towards a more Victorian style of neighborhood development, where you're looking for more walkability, you're looking for more integration and mixed use. Younger generations like to have the corner deli that they can go to and the dog park that they can go to without having to get in their car. So by prohibiting what consumers are looking for and by forcing more costly design types is one way that zoning codes impact affordability. The other way is that when you have a zoning code that doesn't match what people want, when people try to get what they want, they have to ask for variances and exceptions to the rule. And again, that's fine procedure as long as it is transparent and predictable. If it is not transparent and predictable, it adds uncertainty to the development process, which translates to money. And in particular, you have to hire attorneys, you have to hire accountants, you have to hire specialists and surveyors and different service providers, all of which ultimately gets transferred to the end user and pushes affordability further and further out of reach. I, of course, am speaking in generalities. This isn't any singular community. This is just the general landscape that a lot of researchers are assessing. So we've talked about value engineering. I'm going to skip through some of these relatively quickly now. The next tier of affordable housing tool that we have is low-cost debt. So whether you are building a big apartment building or you're building a tiny accessory dwelling unit, chances are you're going to need to get a mortgage to be able to pay for the construction. And again, very intuitive for our family budget. If you pay 16% interest rate, that's going to be a lot less affordable than if you pay a 2% interest rate. So low-cost debt is a cost savings in the financing that you're able to pass on to that end user, which is usually going to be a homeowner or a renter. These tools are cascading. They act like a waterfall. To get real deep affordability, you can't just pick the one you like. You have to pick all of them. It is an all of the above sort of menu option. So assuming that these are working in tandem, the next one that you would add to your toolkit are construction grants, ways to make the building less expensive to build. We have a really fantastic example of this here in Central Ohio. It's the Franklin County Magnet Fund. It's supported by conveyance fees from Franklin County Economic Development. And what it does is it builds affordable housing and it vets those resources into buildings that are on high density transit corridors to really support CODA and transit work. When you take those three tools together, you can achieve an affordability range that's generally in the 60% AMI space, which, again, this isn't scientific, but for me, I kind of view that as a blue-collar rate. AMI is area median income. No,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Area median income.
Oh, thank you.
And I will certainly send these slides out if you would like. I have all of those definitions in that slide that was at the top. And then the final kind of tier of affordable housing tool is operating grants. If you have especially fixed income renters or fixed income homeowners, I think homeowners are a great example to talk about operating grants through. If you receive just supplemental security income or just retirement, there are times where your income is not enough to pay for even a free house. Even if you spent your whole life working, you paid off your mortgage, now all you have are taxes, insurance. Unfortunately, sometimes your your retirement income is not sufficient to cover that. So one of the tools we have for that particular case is the Homestead exemption to property taxes to make it a little bit easier to stay in your home if you're an owner-occupant. That same dynamic of not having enough income coming in to pay for operating expenses, like maintenance, like taxes, if you're in an apartment building, like a front desk or a security system, that can be offset in a number of ways. Homestead exemption is one. In renters, a common one is housing vouchers, the Housing Choice Program. I'm going to go very quickly through a deep dive on the construction aspect in particular, because I know there's been a lot of questions about the low-income housing tax credit program, which is phenomenal. It's the most prolific affordable housing tool that we have, also one of the most prolific economic development tools. In a lot of communities, you will see that revitalization and resurgence is initiated by an investment from the low-income housing tax credit program, which stabilizes the market and allows businesses to come in and flourish. It's a bricks and sticks program. That means it's just paying for the construction. There's no tenant subsidy. There's no sort of policy aspect to it. And the mechanism through which it works is ungodly complicated because it's the IRS. But essentially what it is a dollar for dollar offset to federal income tax. It helps me to think about it, to think about how the charitable income tax credit works or the charitable income deduction works. You have to pay those taxes. It's your personal tax liability. You can either give it to a charity that you absolutely love and you know does good work in your community, or you can give it to the government. A lot of people are going to choose a charity. In this case, a lot of people choose to invest it in affordable housing. There are technically two LIHTC programs. For the next few slides, I'm going to separate them out, blue and gray, because they have important differences. Same underlying framework, but they're unique. There is a non-competitive program. Those monies are available to anybody who wants to come and take it. If Gahanna says, I really want an apartment building at the corner of blank and blank, and I need someone to help me pay for it, the non-competitive program is for you. You don't have to fight anybody, those dollars are just there. The downside to that is it's called a shallow subsidy. If you have a $10 million building that you want to build, they can only give you about $3 million. You have to go out and find your other $7 million somewhere, but it is unlimited. The flip side is the competitive program, which is the exact opposite. They can give you about 70% of your cost. So they can give you $7 million. You only have to go and find another $3 million. But everybody and their mother is trying to get that pot of money. Highly, highly, highly competitive, incredibly under-resourced. The non-competitive program tends to be slightly bigger projects that are slightly less affordable. The competitive program, slightly smaller projects, slightly more affordable. Small nuances. The non-competitive program, the biggest challenge with this, I don't think it's any surprise, is you got to find that other $7 million somewhere. Those resources are similarly very, very limited. If there are, there are some communities that are better able to get those. There are some communities that have programs already set up that let them draw down from them essentially at will. There are others that don't. They don't have the underlying infrastructure to be able to do that. For the competitive program, the biggest challenge there is that there's rules that say who gets those resources and who don't. Which communities win, which communities don't win. Those rules are set by the state of Ohio. They are updated biannually. Sometimes they work in Central Ohio's favor, sometimes they do not. Quick deep dive. Those rules are governed by a document called the Qualified Allocation Plan, and it covers all kinds of things. As a state entity, though, they have to balance different needs. So they can't put all of their resources into the suburbs, or else the cities are going to yell. They can't put all of their resources into urban areas, or rural areas are going to complain. So they have to create balance among geographies. Similarly, they create balance among different populations that have housing needs. Seniors, people escaping homelessness, especially homeless youth, families. All of these different balanced interests are reflected in that scoring system. There's different tools that the state uses to achieve their policy objectives. The biggest one that you're going to hear about is points. This is a points game. Everybody's shooting to get a 100%. Lots of people do get a 100%. In that case, tiebreakers kick in. So it's a very intricate maze of rules and incentives. You will see, though, from this list up here, that the state is trying to accomplish a lot of different policy objectives with their point system. It's everything from incentivizing housing where there's really killer amenities. There's a grocery store next door, there's a healthcare center down the street, abundant jobs, especially abundant entry-level jobs. When you think about a population that is struggling with income, think about the amenities that they would need. That's what the state tries to drive their development towards. There's goods and there's less goods with that. For instance, having access to a high-powered transit system is objectively great. Gahanna, Reynoldsburg, Worthington, Westerville, our communities were not set up with industrial-sized transit systems in mind. It wasn't the need that we had then. Arguably, it's not the need we have now. It makes it difficult for communities in the suburban rings to be able to compete with the Cincinnatis and the Clevelands of the world who are set up differently. So we do have some challenges in getting access to these resources. Going back to those two programs, and I believe this is the last slide on that, there are a lot of opportunities for communities that want to expand the diversity of their housing stock, especially to create mixed income housing, to be able to play in this world. For the non-competitive program, the easiest thing, easy being relative, the most impactful thing is to create local gap funding programs, to be able to find a way to generate that additional $7 million. It can come from governments, it can come from nonprofits, it can come from public-private partnerships. There's a lot of different forms that can take. The other tool is to really make sure that you're maximizing the investment mechanisms you already have on the books. So for instance, using CRAs, using TIFs, using bond dollars, all of these things are cities that are most successful at being able to access non-competitive programs. They typically have sophisticated staff who know how to use those different levers. To be able to obtain competitive tax credits, oh my good golly, I'm sorry. Competitive tax credits, one of the best things that local governments who want to access these resources can do is just be ready to say yes. The state scoring system is mezzanine, right? It is complicated, it is difficult to navigate, but when those stars do align and the state policy says, we love Hamilton, we think that this would be perfect. Are you ready to say yes? We can move quickly. We have the zoning code in place. We have the local rules. We know builders who are able to do it. We have a local nonprofit that's able to shepherd it in and make sure that it's representative of what the community needs, being ready. Also, keeping in mind that those rules are not static. They get revised every 2 years by the state of Ohio. If you have an area that you would like to see more housing in, the state's rules do not align to that, opening up a dialogue with the state, saying, I understand what you're trying to do, but I'm trying to do something too. How can we come closer together? Always very powerful. I do think that one of the things that we are going to expect to see in a macro sense from the qualified allocation plan and this rule book in the coming years is an acknowledgement that Central Ohio is objectively different. Not better, not worse, but different from our peer cities. We are growing at a faster clip. Our economic development and our job growth looks different. Making sure that there's that recognition in the QAP is something that I think we can do together because it benefits all of our communities. And there's precedent in the QAP for doing that before. Oh, I apologize that that text is so light. One of the notes that I kind of wanted to begin to conclude on is that Franklin County in particular has done amazing things with regard to its affordable housing need. There is always a lot of talk about the doom and the gloom and how terrible it is. And those data sets that I shared earlier are heavy, and I understand that. But we started out with 54,000 households that were severely cost burdened. They were making decisions at the end of the month about how their family was going to survive. Were they going to sacrifice food? Were they going to sacrifice medicine? That was 54,000 of our neighbors. And that was 2017. In 4 years, we were able to bring that number down to about 49,000. Didn't solve it. Still a lot of people with a lot of need. We are one of the few cities that is going the right way on this metric. It's about scaling up. It's about expanding resources. It's about taking the things that we've learned work and doing more of them and more powerfully. Some of the things that we have done to crack that code are exactly what I mentioned before. We have created local gap programs. You need that extra $7 million. Franklin County has some programs to be able to help do that. Very, very successful. City of Columbus has used their affordable housing and their general obligation bonds to do very similar things within municipal boundaries. We've updated our CRA policy in the City of Columbus. We've created a housing trust fund and a housing action fund in Franklin County as a whole. And then all of this is complemented by a balanced policy agenda that makes sure we don't just have the bricks and the sticks in the housing, but we have equity within those programs. Some examples of that are source of income ordinances, which make sure that landlords are making rental decisions by whether a tenant has sufficient income to afford their obligations, as opposed to a moral judgment on where that income is coming from. And pay-to-stay ordinances, which make sure that tenants essentially are able to replicate the rights of homeowners, where if they fall behind on rent, they are extended a grace period to catch up before they are set out of their building, which is really just a codification of the existing law that's on our books. So I realized that I did a little bit of a blitzkrieg there and went through anything and everything. I appreciate the time. I'm always happy to support your work and grateful for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much, Director.
That was great.
Any questions or discussion from council? Yes, Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Booz, for being here. Really appreciate the presentation. And thank you, Director Strum, for another wonderful presentation and guest. One of the things that I work for the county during the day, and one of the things that you're constantly thinking about is the upcoming sexennial reappraisal of property values, well, throughout the state, but here in Franklin County, expecting a marked increase in property values. And when talking about folks on fixed incomes, that weighs heavy. And have you, in your experience, have you seen anybody who's doing this really well, like helping to either mitigate that or ameliorate some of the effects of that? Are there other communities doing this well? Are there proposals out there at the State House maybe to help? Or
Yes. I mean, the easy answer is yes. Not a direct parallel, but Michigan as a whole has had a lot of up and down with property values over the years. They have been really innovative in that space. There are proposals that are going to be introduced and that are working their way through the State House now that would give relief and allow property taxes to catch up to income. Just not stop it, not completely get rid of it, but just pause it long enough so that it can catch up with the cost of living. Again, very important for those who are on Social Security, for those who are on benefits, because they're pegged to inflation rates. It does take state action. I would say that if you are working with somebody or you know somebody who's struggling now, and they can't wait for new legislation, there are tools that we have in place. Everybody should have the owner-occupied homestead credit. Making sure that that's already reflected is important. The Franklin County Auditor has also done fantastic things around education and making sure that people are able to enforce those rights. So for instance, if somebody is struggling to pay their property taxes, they can work with an attorney to make sure that that property is properly evaluated and that their load is correct. A lot of other things that I'd be happy to share in follow-up.
Thank you. Thank you, Director.
Any other questions tonight? I just want to thank you for being an excellent resource for us. I know that you've provided insight to us over the last couple years especially, and I know you will continue to be an excellent resource for us as we navigate this with the anticipated growth. So thank you again, and thank you, Director Strum, for inviting Director Booth to join us tonight.
Thank you. And I'll note in the next session in 2 weeks, we'll have a guest with us as well. Jeffrey Harris of Council for Bricker and Eckler will be here. One of the reasons I want to have Director Booz with me this evening was really to talk through a little bit about how do we value development? How do we understand as a city how we want to grow, where we want to grow? I think her earlier slide indicating the middle school, the teacher education. I was down in Cincinnati about 2 months ago now and talking with their affordable housing teams and talking about the role of entry-level police officers and first responders and teachers. And what those salaries look like in those counties, in those communities, and making sure that the housing that is being developed aligns to some of those resources so those folks can both live and work in our community. And so I was thrilled to see that inclusion in your slide deck. But Jeff's going to be here to talk a little bit about ROI. And so how do we value this investment? How do we value what development's happening here? And how do we make sure that we're having the right level of development opportunity in our community? So thank you all for your time this evening.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right. The next item on our agenda tonight, it regards dissolving the Community Urban Redevelopment Corporation. Is this Clerk Van Meter, are you addressing this tonight, or?
Someone from administration.
Yes, I'd like to invite Director Burry up so that she can really explain the background of the Kirk. These development organizations truly like their acronyms, but she is well equipped to give the background of the Kirk and what the future of the needs of that organization look like.
Great. Thank you, Director Burry.
Sure. So this is all related to legislation that was passed in 1978. The city had a large tract of land that was called the industrial zone, where they leased very cheaply properties to developers and owners, and then at the end of these very long leases, the property conveyed back to those individuals. The last of the properties was transferred in 2014. So since the program is done, and it's unlikely that we're going to do another program like this, there's no reason to have the board intact anymore.
Thank you. Will there be legislation forthcoming to dissolve the corporation?
If that is the will of council to do that, then we can present legislation and have that available at the next committee of the whole.
Yeah, I think it cleans it up because we've recently had some applicant interest in this board. So I think that if we can move forward with legislation formally dissolving it, that would help keep the ordinance clean and make sure this is clearly articulated for the future.
We can do that. I can work with the city attorney for any clarifications we may need.
Yeah, it's a corporation. I can dissolve it once you guys decide to dissolve it, but yeah, we could do that.
So we need an ordinance to declare the dissolution and then.
Then I can dissolve it, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I think, all right, we'll look forward to that legislation then. The third item under discussion, I just wanted to bring to the attention of the balance of council. Director Vollmer has been working with Clemens Nelson, the outside consultant, on developing an employee handbook. That employee handbook has been implemented for the administration, and at this point, it's been recommended that we take a look at it as well for implementation and adoption for council office. I know Jeremy and a couple of us have received, I think, a copy of it, or maybe all of us have received PDFs so far. If not, we'll make sure they go out. And then if you have any feedback on that, just offer that feedback to Director Van Meter, Clerk Van Meter. I was just promoted you to Clerk Van Meter, and we would expect this to come forward for a resolution to adopt this handbook in the future.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes.
And I spoke with President Renner just before the meeting. He did apologize. He was not able to attend tonight. Due to his specific role as President of Council and pursuant to Council rules, he's the supervisor of Council office. So he did request that if any members did have specific comments or things, to submit those to him.
Oh, good, perfect. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have not seen a copy.
Okay, we'll get it. Would you mind circulating the document to
Absolutely,
balance of
yes.
council? Okay, thank you. All right. Anything else on that tonight? All right. Items from the council office. We have a resolution that women Padova and McGregor have been working on. I'll turn it over to you to address Resolution 26-2022.
Thank you. So September is Hunger Action Month, and we wanted to take that opportunity to also recognize Gahanna residents in need and their role since they've been addressing this in the community here in Gahanna for the last 50 years. It is especially pertinent right now as we've seen a huge increase in need within our community. A lot of numbers have been going up with assistance in the pantry. A lot of people who have needed to come in, even for like kind of emergency services in between normal pantry hours. So we did have, you should have a redlined version. There are just a few things that we cleaned up on this. Grin does serve the Gahanna-Jefferson School District as well as the entire 43230 zip code. So it is all of Gahanna, but then a few pockets outside of Gahanna as well. And then the other language was just cleaned up a little bit to be a little bit more concise.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your work on this. So since this has not been introduced yet, I don't think we need to do any amendments, but we can just put forward the clean red line, like do the clean version of the red line and have it on for.
Oh, and there will be some people next week to present this to from Grin.
Fantastic. So then on regular agenda, okay. All right, Section D of the agenda, items from the mayor's office. We have one item, Ordinance 55-2022, an ordinance to establish separate departments for public service and engineering. Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a request for an ordinance to establish separate departments for public service and engineering. This is an issue that was previously mentioned to council several months ago, back when our former city engineer, John Moorhead, had announced that he would be leaving to take a promotional opportunity for another municipality. The intent would be to officially separate public service from engineering and establish two separate departments. This is based on several factors. Number one, the workload and the type of work of the engineering division has really changed significantly in recent years, largely due to the passage of Issue 12. The increase in the number of capital projects, the number of development projects as well that have come forth has really changed how the engineering division now works in conjunction with other divisions and other departments, public service, in addition to public service, the planning department, the development department, parks and recreation, and the way that they work has drastically changed in that regard. In addition, when Mr. Moorhead left, I had mentioned at that time to council that I felt it was really necessary to be able to elevate the city engineer position to one of director of engineering. Finding an engineer in Franklin County right now is like finding a needle in a haystack, and really felt that we needed to elevate that position in order to be competitive, to attract high-quality candidates. We were successful in that and being able to hire Mr. Comlank as director of engineering for the city. So that was also one of the factors. And also, the third would be through the years, public service and engineering have been combined largely due to the skill sets of the staff that was here at the time. Most municipalities keep those divisions separate, so this would be in line with what most other municipalities do and how they structure. The charter was changed back in November of last year, which gives the mayor authority to establish and create departments without necessarily having to go to council. However, the provision also says that it must be consistent with charter. In talking with the city engineer, our current charter references the Department of Public Service and Engineering. So based on our city attorney's recommendation, he felt it was best to formally go through the process of obtaining an ordinance from council to establish those separate departments to make sure that we are consistent with charter and that we basically clear that up to make sure that we are legislatively accurate. We have done this before with the Department of Planning and Development when we separated those into two separate departments as well. So there certainly is precedent for this council having done this within the last 2.5 years. So with that, would respectfully ask council for an ordinance authorizing the separation of public service from engineering and establishing two different departments.
Any questions or discussion?
It would be interesting to know the history of this because it has changed several times over the years. It's been one department, two departments, one department, two. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
All right, so on for first reading, no need to come back, and then consent agenda? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Section E, items from the Department of Finance. Director Burry, we have two items from you tonight, Ordinance 57-2022 and Resolution 28-2022.
Yes, the first one is related to our TIF funds. So we just had a couple TIFs that outproduced our revenue projections, which means there's additional auditor and treasurer fees. So a small supplemental of $1,310 is needed to be separated amongst those TIF accounts to cover those auditor and treasurer fees.
Any discussion? All right, on for first reading, no need to come back, consent? All right, thank you. And the second item?
This is the end result of the tax budget that was passed. So it's the resolution from the County Budget Commission accepting the amounts and rates and filing those. So basically takes our 2.4 mils and spreads it across the three funds.
Any discussion or questions from council? All right, this is a resolution, so it only requires one reading. Is everyone okay with consent agenda at the upcoming meeting? All right. All right, thank you, Director Burry. Section F, items from the Department of Parks and Recreation. We have one resolution on the agenda tonight, 29-2022. Director Farrell.
Thank you.
Happy Monday.
Administration has the opportunity to seek alternative funding through MARPC attributable funds. The application would be for the completion of the Big Walnut Trail, the last section through the city of Gahanna. The scope of the project would be from Rocky Fork to the bridge over North Hamilton. The actual bridge project is separate that's not part of the scope of this application. And then we take it from the bridge onto Pizarro Park. So we're separating out that bridge in response to this application since the ODOT project is happening in response to the trail project. So as part of the application, there is a requirement to receive authorization in order to move forward with that application.
Excellent. Any discussion or question from council?
This would be a joyous thing to have this come to an end.
can I ask does attributable mean? Attributable mean? What does that? the
Sure,
funds?
it's the, MARPC has the opportunity to use transportation funding in order to apply that towards projects, whether it be bike and ped or other road projects. So it's basically taking a portion of federal transportation funds throughout the region.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Weaver.
Thank you. I just want to say, I've said it at a previous committee, I appreciate this administration's efforts to find alternative funding and applying for various grants out there, and just wanted to reiterate that for the record. So thank you for doing that. Out of curiosity, who actually does the applying and writing of the grant applications? Is it the individual departments, or is it through this?
It depends on the application. There are some that each department will take on. In this particular instance, Parks and Recreation submitted I guess the first round, or it's basically the preliminary application to see if the project is able to move forward. We were obviously able to move forward. We made it past that first round. The second round, we have initiated a contract with Structure Point. Structure Point has thankfully been part of this project for quite some time. This project is over 15 years in the making. So there's a lot of historical information that Structure Point has been part of. The Parks and Recreation will work in collaboration with Structure Point, so we make sure that the Gahanna story is told along with the technical aspects of the application. But we are working in coordination with them. The application is due the end of September, so it's also a component of hiring a third party. It does take quite a bit of time and effort in order to submit an application of that stature.
If I could add on to that as well, just looking ahead to the future, one of the things that that I am currently working on right now is obtaining quotes from consultants to engage somebody who can be just a designated grant writer for us. As Director Farrell just said, these applications take a great deal of time, and our staff is very busy, and we want to make sure that we best position ourselves in the city to receive outside funding. So we will be engaging an outside consultant to assist us with grant opportunities. Certainly with Council's historic vote last week with the facility, there will be opportunities for grant funding that we'll be pursuing with regard to that. So having somebody that we can count on to not only identify those opportunities for us, but then to help us with that process, I think will be critical for us.
Thank you.
I just want to reiterate how important this project is to Gahanna and how meaningful this project will be, not just from a recreation perspective, but how it really is an alternative mode of transportation, and particularly with City Hall being planned to be located in that area. This will give us greater connectivity for our residents to be able to reach that property, and I think that that's a really important point that we keep making, and part of telling our story and why we should be awarded this grant funding opportunity.
Absolutely. And if I may add to that,
Yes.
this isn't the only project that we anticipate to move forward with some grant funding. We do have some design preliminary estimates, overall cost estimates, one in particular for a connection from Creekside to the new library. So that's something that we have in collaboration with OHM, so that we can have the information that we need in order to move forward with some requests for funding. That project obviously has a lot of, it checks a lot of boxes as far as what some of those grants are looking for. And then we also have some work in with a connection from Headley to Hanna Park. Again, we have large neighborhoods, two very large parks with a limited access for safe pedestrian or bicycle access. So those are projects that we're also actively looking to pursue some alternative funding as well.
Excellent.
I think
yes, Mrs.
also
Angela.
that MARPC would be very helpful going to the directors. Now, there's some issues with the grant. There were so many grants coming in that it was very difficult. So any one of those directors could be very helpful to to make sure that we get the money that we should be getting.
We get on schedules as often as we can.
I know
So
you
that's
do.
that's
I know you
absolutely a
do.
resource that we look to. Thank you.
All right, consent agenda? Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Section G, items from the Division of Engineering. We have 2 items tonight, Ordinance 58-2022, an ordinance authorizing supplemental appropriations, and Resolution 30-2022, a resolution consenting to the ODOT Bridge Inspection Services. Director Colmack.
Good evening. Our projects are up within private development as well as right-of-way. And with the increase in construction and construction activity, our fees associated with the inspection on each of those accounts are up as well. So as a result.
I'm gonna check your microphone, Tom. Stephanie's setting you up for success. There you go.
So, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Great. So construction activity is up in both private development as well as construction within our public right-of-ways. As a result, the fees associated with inspection of those projects, whether it's private commercial development or the work in the right-of-way, Columbia Gas, AEP, others that are occupying and doing construction in the right-of-way. With those costs going up, we have fees for the inspection services on that. Those are going up with that, and it's thus requiring the supplemental appropriation into the given funds and to be in compliance with the governmental accounting standards. Any questions?
No?
The
Sorry, just one, on for first reading, no need to come back, consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Okay. And the second item is the Ohio Department of Transportation provides a local service to local governments to inspect bridges within the area. We've taken advantage of this over the last 2 years and would like to continue that for our 3rd year coming up.
Excellent. Any discussion or questions on this item? All right, consent agenda? Thank you, Director.
Anybody else coming up here?
No, no, you can turn that off. All right, if there is nothing else for the agenda tonight,
I'd like to bring up something, the Summit on Sustainability. I talked with Mayor Jadwin, and on her birthday, giving her some kind of something
Thank you,
to do.
Councilwoman.
And Jeremy as well, that potentially we can maybe get tables at the Sustainability Summit. And I think you guys are going to work together and decide so if you want to go, we'll get these tables. And it's really a wonderful opportunity to see what's all happening with MORPC and the sustainability.
what's the date? Do you have the date on that?
I do have the date on that.
October 14th?
Yeah, I
Or
think it's the
15th,
14th.
whatever the Friday is.
I think
Hold
it's
on.
the 14th, I thought.
Yeah, 14th, Friday the 14th.
We want to get in, because this is going to be at the Hilton rather than at the big place. So, anyway.
Thank you.
Okay.
I've attended in the past, and it's an excellent,
It
excellent
really
summit.
is. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. And of course, the mayor is part of this now. So I'm really happy to be able to say, she's going to probably be sitting at the main table.
I don't know, well, I don't know what the seating chart will be, but I do know that the lineup of speakers and breakout sessions especially is very interesting. And certainly as we continue our work on the creation of our sustainability plan here at the city, which, interesting side note, I know we're about to adjourn, but I'll throw it in here, is we actually have a Gahanna resident who is approached the city about his capstone project in his senior year. He's at Penn State, but we'll forgive him for that, I'm sorry. But in any event, he is working on our sustainability plan and is now looking at 825 Tech Center Drive as to how we can incorporate sustainability initiatives within the renovation and construction of of the additional space there. So that will be coming to council sometime in December with his suggestions and recommendations on that.
And I think that potentially maybe all of us will want to come, maybe some might not want to come, but maybe we can have people from Planning Commission, those people, and as well as our wonderful clerk here potentially going. So I think it's just really a time that we can show that Gahanna wants to be a really active point in the MORPC agendas. So, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. If nothing else, then I think we'll adjourn tonight's meeting. Good night.